Welcome along, and this is the top 10 for worst units in the game. Just for a bit of fun, I thought, I'm on a bit of a roll. I did the top 10 best units, and I enjoyed doing it. So I thought, well, originally I was going to do a top 5 because there were around 5 units that came to my mind immediately when I thought, what are the worst units? But then I thought, wow, why don't we just make it a top 10 like I did for the best units? And that was more difficult, but I managed to come up with 10 and see if you agree. So let's get cracking. And at number 10, I am going to include the light long bowman. Now, in my opinion, we're on the base game. Medieval came out a couple of months ago, and we're waiting for the first DLC, which is weeks or month away. It's coming very soon, and I think that this area, i.e. archers, this is probably where we're going to see some changes, because at the moment there's just a few issues in cost, effectiveness. These light long bowmen are 36 and they're skirmishers essentially. So you've got javelin men at 24, slingers at 24. You've got your archers, skirmisher archers, they're 30. So 36 for essentially a souped-up skirmisher unit is a lot to pay. And you have your standard archers in other lists that are the same price, but they're bowmen, so that means at least they can attack infantry. You can sometimes, in battles I've seen where, sometimes players forget about bowmen and they're up on a hill or on the flank, and once infantry is engaged, even though they've got no POA, archers can still get flank attacks, so they can come in useful at crucial moments. But you just can't do that with skirmishers, other than if units are on rough ground. So 36 for a skirmish unit is really quite high, I would say. And I know there's been talk about some archer units. I mean, this is the Welsh list, and I'm going to talk about the Welsh bowmen later. Maybe we need some stakes, a little bit of a defensive capability, because on the battlefield, once they get into melee, they don't hold at all against infantry. So there we go. This is it. The light longbowmen. Maybe they should be around 34 or something, a touch cheaper. I know also it's difficult sometimes because you've got to take into account the list as well. So if you start changing units, putting prices down, then that means that a list will get stronger maybe in other areas. So there's a lot to think about. It's not just a unit in isolation. But anyway, for the purposes of the list, 36, that's expensive. So they come in at number 10. And we are going to do 9 and 8. Now you might disagree with me here. Put your comments below. But I'm going to put number 9. I'm going to put the armored spearmen, defensive. So their average quality, they're armored, and they're defensive spearmen. 42. So the question really is, what are you paying for? Because your standard spearmen are average protected defensive spearmen, and these are just armored. So they get a bonus from being armored. But at 42, is that quite a jump? maybe they're not so bad. 42 is maybe a reasonable price, but on the battlefield, I don't know if I see so much difference over your standard spearmen. They look fantastic, these long shields, but talking about performance, do they really perform that much better for 6 more over your standard spearmen? I'm not sure that they do, but they're worth adding a couple maybe. I don't think I'd add 4 or 5, but maybe 2 or so wouldn't be too bad. And then you go on to the Armoured Spearman Offensive. So this is going to be at number 8, this unit, because you're paying 48. Now, I think there's more of an argument for the Defensive Spearmen at 42 to say that they're a fair price, but you're paying 48 for the same average armoured, and these are offensive spearmen, and it just means you get an advantage on impact and on pushing back units. If you want to push back units, then you need your offensive units. But in general, in games, I don't think there's all that much difference. And going on your standard spearmen at 36 and you're jumping to 48 for armoured offensive spearmen, I don't think they're a good buy at 48, in my opinion. I think if I have, this is the German list, if I have options, I would probably just spend more money on the slightly cheaper units, the defensive armoured spearmen, and maybe add or upgrade a few units here. Maybe they should be 46 or something. They should be a little bit cheaper in my opinion. Perhaps armoured defensive spearmen are around about the right price, but the offensive armoured spearmen are too expensive. So they are number 8. At number 7 on my list, I feel sorry as well for putting them on my list, but because they're quite neat. There's not. I like units that can fire and fight, and we need probably more of them because there's probably quite a few units that actually did fire and fight, and it moves us away from the more generic spearmen, and swordsmen. So I do like the idea of these units, and they look cool. The dismounted Lithuanian cavalry. So they're bowmen, they've got some armor, they're also swordsmen. But for the price, 58. I think I played against the Lithuanians a couple of times, and whenever I've played against this kind of army, these units, once they get into melee, it's kind of all over. They don't hold for long because they've only got some armor. They're bowmen, and just a little bit expensive. I think they need the quality. Yes, is above average, but for 58, I mean, you can, 48 for. I mean, on my list is the offensive armored spearmen, and they cost 4. They're 10 less than this unit, and I was saying that the offensive armored spearmen are overpriced. So against a lot of units that are armored, they're not going to do so well with their bows. So they're kind of up against it, I would say, as things stand. I don't rate them that much. Maybe you disagree. Maybe you think that they're fairly priced. Maybe because I haven't played with the Lithuanians that much, maybe you've had success. But if I have to compare to some other units, like for instance these Baltic Foot and the picked Baltic Foot, I think these are really well priced. I think is it 36 and 42, something like that. But these are impact foot. So for 36 impact foot swordsmen, when I think about it, when I did my top 10 best units, Baltic foot can easily be in the top 10 actually. Maybe when I update my list, they'll go in because they're well priced. They can often disrupt units on impact, and that gives them an advantage. And at only 36, what more can you ask for? And then the upgraded unit, the picked Baltic Foot, the superior quality as opposed to average, which is great for cohesion checks, and they are really good as well. So if you bring a couple of those, I think that can be beneficial to your army. But these, when you compare the price, 36, 42 and then 58, they're definitely overpriced for me. At number 6, the Welsh Spear. Now, let me say I quite like Welsh Spear. They look quite neat. A large unit, so you get a little bit of the strength modifier, but unfortunately they are medium foot, and at 50, paying 50 for medium foot, they are average quality and lightly protected as well. That's expensive, because in the open field against heavy infantry, they're just not going to stand for so long. You're going to need a little bit of luck and some support. So I'd have to say they're probably a little bit overpriced for their effectiveness. They are offensive spearmen, as I've said. They're a large unit, so that's pluses, but lightly protected as well. So against skirmishers and archer fire, they're going to suffer, and they're just going to suffer generally against heavy infantry. So it's the same for the early Scottish spear. They're the same unit. You don't get a lot for your money, I'd say, at 50. At number 5, the poor old free canton spearman. I mean, when I first started playing this game, I thought that they were the larger unit, because you can get the larger spear unit, like the lowland spear and so on. And these, they cost 39. They got great looking spears, so they really do look great, but they're medium foot. Average protective offensive spearmen, yes, but they're medium foot, so they're not going to hold against heavy infantry. And in this kind of army, I mean, they're literally all medium foot. It's going to be hard to fight an army like the Germans, for example, with nigh on impossible, I would suggest. I mean, literally all your units are medium foot, and you've got some crossbowmen as well, so they deserve their spot in the top 5. Okay, price wise, not so bad, 39, but most armies have got access to your standard spearmen, which are only 36, and they're heavy foot. So I'm not even that sure why they're 39. I think they should be 36 at the very most. So I can't really say anything positive about them, apart from maybe the price should come down. So they are number 5. At number 4, maybe this will provoke some discussion. I am going to put the City Knights. So the City Knights, not your standard knights, they're at 72, and these ones are the military order knights, they're I think 77. So the City Knights are fairly, well, considerably cheaper really, they're 60. But what do you get for the money? So above average quality, your knights are superior, and they're heavily armored as well. But I don't know, I haven't used them that much. I've fought against them a few times, and I wasn't so impressed. So it's kind of the same story with the knights. Knights are pretty much hit and miss. Sometimes they do well, sometimes they get stuck. But if these units are only above average quality, and you're still paying 60 for them, I haven't been impressed with City Knights myself. Maybe you've got other experiences, other stories to share. Let me know in the comments below. But I just don't really trust them. If I can have, if I've got the extra 12 points, I'll just use them on knights. Also, because when you pay the extra for knights, that they're superior and heavily armored. So most of the time they're going to do well in most matchups on the battlefield. Okay, you sacrifice some maneuverability, but when you have this unit that it just isn't as good, and yet also it suffers from just not being as agile and maneuverable as standard cavalry, you've got to ask the question, are they really worth 60? I'm not so sure. I haven't been impressed. So for me, they're at number 4 at the moment. Maybe I'll play the game more, maybe use some lists with City Knights, maybe I'll change my opinion, but at the moment I would just save my points, and generally I'll just pay the extra for the knights. At number 3, we have the Baltic levies, and these units are really poor. I mean, when I looked at the stats, you're paying 30 for them, which is the same price as irregular foot, which we all know. We've played with them. They were in the Ancients game, and we know what they're like. But they're actually worse because the quality, they're below average quality, whereas irregular foot are average quality when you check. And yes, their armor is protected and irregular foot is lightly protected, but really quality is probably more important. If you keep them away from skirmishers, then it's really, you're just up against infantry, and below average quality, they're just not going to last. And so what can you say? 30, same price as the regular foot, but worse quality. Not much going for them. And in this army, they make a fair proportion of your army, so they're not great. Try to keep, they're medium foot, so you just got to try to keep them hidden, try to keep them behind your main lines, use them to flank perhaps, but you can't rely on them in any way. So they are number 3. At number 2, At number 2, the Welsh Longbowmen. Really quite expensive for what they are. 42, unprotected, have the longbow, but once they get anywhere near fighting in melee, they're hopeless essentially. They need either maybe a drop in price, maybe to 39 or something, or what I mentioned earlier, some stakes. There's been talk about maybe in coming DLCs, some bowmen are going to get some defensive capabilities, and they really need them, I think, because they're just overpriced, and it's a shame because they look good. They've got obviously against the battles against the French. They have historic standing, and they're well known, well loved by wargamers. But in this game, I just think they need a little bit extra added to them. So maybe this is what we're going to see in coming DLCs. Maybe there'll be a unit with stakes, and maybe it will be 45 or something, or maybe around the same price. Let's see. But they definitely need some help, I would say, and some love. But there has been talk about that happening. So let's see what happens in the DLCs. But at the moment, as things stand, 42. It's expensive. The crossbowmen, in comparison, are 39, so they're cheaper. But the crossbowmen are swordsmen, so they can actually do quite well against raw spear, defensive spear, medium foot. They can hold their own, whereas the bowmen, they can't. So, and yet they cost 3 more. So number 2, unfortunately for them, this is what they deserve. Number 2 on my list. And at number 1, maybe some of you have already guessed what it's going to be. Yes, this mighty standard wagon. I mean, what is this about? Did armies really fight with these things? I mean, I've got so many questions about these. I mean, I think, like most players, I just ignore them when I see them on as an option to take. I mean, I've never taken them in my life. 9 times out of 10 battles I play in the league friendly, maybe even more than that. I mean, players never take them. This season, there's one game where Carvon, actually, I know some of you know him. He's taken a wagon, but I think that's the first time. This is our first season, okay, of playing medieval. So it's the only time I've seen someone take them, and in friendly games, no one generally takes them. I mean, okay, superior quality armored. Defensive spearmen, they're so slow, they can only move 1 hex at a time. They can't attack anything. It just seems to me, anyway, a waste of space. Unless on a standard battlefield, a standard game where you're going to be, fighting somewhere in the middle. They're just so slow, so useless. Seems to me that it's a real waste of money to take them at 79. Now, maybe with the DLCs to come, maybe there'll be more kind of defensive scenarios where you're fighting to protect a city or something, and you've got to get past some of these. Then I could see their use. But in your normal standard battle, where you're trying to move, trying to get an advantage, where taking space is a big an advantage as anything else. So I need to take this area, hold the high ground, etc., etc. What's the use of taking a standard wagon? So in your standard arm battles, they're just too expensive. I mean, if they had bows or something, give them give them something to do. They could get a spot on the battlefield and fire some arrows at the enemy. Maybe they would be useful then, but as things stand now, they're really, for me, pretty useless. So they well deserve #1 spot. What I just want to say, actually, looking at this list, when I did my top 10 best units, I think I know some players really like these Pavicias and crossbowmen. So they're mixed units, which are great. So 66% crossbow, and then defensive spear and swordsman, all mixed. And I think they're well priced as well. I think they're around, is it 41 or something? 41. And I need to play with armies with them and test them out. But on my updated list to come on the best units, I may well include some of these units. And there's also the raw version as well. So they look quite interesting. So I know some units really like, some players really like these units. So I'm going to keep my eyes out open and try them out. But there we go. Anyway, so that's the end. Let me know what you think, and thanks for watching.